Okay, so today we are going to be calculating the gradient at a point on a curve. So let's try an example and let's see how do we go about calculating the gradient. So let's say, for example, we have an equation g of x is equal to 3x squared, and notice that that is going to be a parabola as we have a squared by the x, right? Okay, so our gradient equation is going to be the limit as h tends to 0, g times a plus h minus g of a over h, right? And that's the equation that we've discussed over here, right? Okay, so step one, let's find g of a. So we said we want to find what the gradient is at point a x equals to -1, right? Okay, so we can plug at g of a, we can plug in -1, so we can find that g of a is equal to 3, right? Okay. So now we want to find out what the value of g of a plus h is, and we can just plug in our -1 plus h, right? And then that's going to be squared. So let's, because our equation is 3x squared, right? So wherever we see x, we just plug in a plus h, right? Okay, so let's plug in that particular equation. We square it, and then we get this expression, and then we multiply it by 3, and then we have that final expression, right? So let's plug the equation into the example. Okay, so we said to calculate the gradient, it's going to be the limit as h tends to 0, g of a plus h minus g of h over g of a over h, right? And it's going to be, because our point was -1, our x point, so it's going to be b times -1 plus h minus g minus 1 over h. So then let's plug in our g of h. We found out that g plus h is this, and we found that our g of a is equal to 3, right? And we've calculated it 3 and that equation over there, right? So now what we can do is we can simplify the formula 3 minus 3, then we're just left with -6 h plus 3h squared over h. We can take out h as a common factor, right? So remember, as we discussed in limits, first simplify the equation, because we're just going to plug in the 0, we're going to end up with infinite numbers. So let's first simplify the equation, and we've simplified the equation. Now we can plug the 0 into 3, and we find that the gradient of this equation at point equals to -6 is equal, -1 is equal to -6. Okay, so let's recap, right? So if we want to calculate the gradient at a particular point, right, we can use our normal gradient equation, and let's say we choose an arbitrary distance, which is x. That's going to be, and let's call that point A. This is going to be a plus a particular distance, and we're going to call that distance h. This y point is going to be f of a, and then the y point of q is going to be a plus a particular distance, which we're going to call h, right? And if we simplify the equation, this is the gradient equation we get. So firstly, for a particular equation, like g of x is equal to 3x squared, right? We can solve it by plugging x in our equation, right? So for g of a, we can plug in -1 in the place of x. We get our equation. We can